Hello and welcome to today's webinar in partnership with Owen Packaging Consulting and Integrity Solutions, hosted by Packaging Europe. Today we will explore an ever-popular topic, how to navigate the EU's PPWR and how to take action to make sure to meet milestones and requirements on time. My name is Elisabeth Skuder. I'm the editor-at-large at Packaging Europe, and today I'm very pleased to welcome our two expert speakers. And we have Renata Daut, who is Sustainable Packaging Consultant at Owen, and we also have Anna Perlina, who is Sustainable Packaging Consultant at Integrity Solutions. They are also content partner of Packaging Europe's Sustainable Packaging Summit, and you can look forward to even more in-depth discussions on the topic of PPWR and of course a lot more at the event, which this year will take place in Utrecht in the Netherlands from November 10th till November 12th. And today our two speakers will give you a useful guide on how to navigate the PPWR's complexities step by step in a structured way, and will address commonly faced challenges and pain points. Before we get into our discussion as such, just a bit of housekeeping. There are 15 minutes at the end of this webinar reserved for an audience Q&A. So make sure you put any questions you may have in the chat and I'll put them to our speakers during the Q&A. If we don't have time to answer your questions, our speakers will be very happy to follow up with you afterwards, and you'll see their contact details at the end, or you have them here as well. So yeah, you know how to get in touch. If you have any technical questions or issues, please select the support button, which you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen. So before we get started with the webinar, we have a couple of poll questions for you to set the scene and to get an idea of where your audience stands on this topic. So let me launch the first poll. I will bring that up on screen now. So yes, so the question is, what's the biggest challenge the industry is facing in terms of the EU PPWR? Answer 1 is difficulty in interpreting the PPWR and lack of clarity. Answer 2, selecting packaging materials and solutions. Answer 3, costs of changes, limited resources and investment. Answer 4, technological readiness and scalability of solutions. And answer 5 is consumer perceptions and buy-in. So yeah, while we wait for our audience to vote on this, I wanted to ask you both, why did you want to ask our audience this particular question?
I can start maybe. Thanks, Elizabeth, for having us here. Basically, PPWR is a complex regulation, and it's impacting the whole packaging value chain. So, and at the same time, so there are not all solutions are available, and it's obviously also coming on top for the businesses. So it obviously implies a lot of challenges, and here we just like to understand what's the biggest one for the our audience today, also maybe to tailor a bit our speech later on. But to me, I would even have a challenge to answer this question personally, because I think all of them are challenging. Normally, if we could have one option, I would say all, and then we all scream. So it's a bit like this for me.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of challenges, and but it'll be very interesting to understand what audience is finding more challenge. And yeah, of course, we are going to speak more about that and try to help in this challenge.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we have a 0 for consumer perception and buy-in, which is consumer is the main also player of this game. So if we think about those refill concepts, for example, right? If the consumer is not engaging with our model, it all doesn't make sense. So it's also a big challenge to me, but here it's not marked.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, yes, we seem to have a sort of clearish leader there with difficulty in interpreting the PPWR and lack of clarity. And then the other 3, selecting packaging material solutions, cost of changes and technological readiness and scalability are all quite even. And yeah, like you mentioned, nobody chose consumer perceptions and buy-in. So from what you say there, I gather that's not 100% what you expected. at least the last one. Is the rest sort of within expectations?
No, but the first point is very valid. So how to interpret PPWR for your own business, and we're going to spend time today discussing exactly this as well.
Great. Okay, so I'll move on to the second poll because yeah, we have a second one. I will launch that now. And yeah, the question there is, where do you think the industry stands in terms of EU PPWR readiness? And the options are interpreting PPWR, identifying compliance gap, developing an action plan, looking for solutions, or actively implementing changes. So yeah, again, I'll ask you, why were you interested in the answers for this particular poll?
Well, it's basically the flow that we're going to discuss today. So all the steps you need to take to PPWR readiness. And for us, it's interesting to understand where our audience stands in this process. Me expecting to see again that, because the PPWR has been published just a few months ago. So normally everybody is a bit like up the stream, so understanding what they have to do. And since also there are uncertainties about PPWR, there will be secondary legislation bringing more clarity. So it's, for me, it's, well, I'm not surprised with the outcome that we see here. So we're far away from implementing solutions.
Yes, it looks like interpreting is the clear leader, followed by identifying compliance. And so yes, actually nicely in the order you put them there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Which goes pretty well with the last poll as well. So the answer from the last poll, it makes sense.
At least we have a correlation.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I will close the poll, and yeah, now it's time for you to take the stage. Over to you, Anna, for to start our presentation today.
Yeah. So hello, everyone, once again, and thank you for joining our session today. Thanks, Elizabeth, for your introduction and running our polls, and thanks to Packaging Europe for hosting our webinar today. So we partnered with Renata for this webinar to provide you with practical guidance how you can achieve PPWR readiness. And we would like also to share today some tips that you can actually take away and try with your teams. So talking about PPWR, you probably all know, now the industry is well aware, so that's the packaging regulation that sets minimum packaging requirements for the packaging sold across the EU markets. And those requirements and targets go up to 2040. So what does it mean for the business and the packaging industries? It means that every packaging strategy and every packaging change in the EU as of now should take into consideration the impact of PPWR requirements, and they go up to 2040. So whatever short or midterm decisions we take today, we need to keep in mind our end point to make sure we align and we don't waste our resources. So on the right, you can see the image. This is the PPWR readiness formula. It's more the illustration that for any complex task like the EU PPWR, we need to have a clear vision, we need to have a strategy, and we need to have actions in order to effectively get to the outcome. So there is no room for the shortcut. And if we're missing on any of those elements, our resources will be scattered, we would not be in time for the PPWR milestones, or we can achieve only suboptimal result and we afterwards need to change. And that's obviously we would like to avoid. So this complex task requires a robust process, and that's what we would like to talk to you about today. So here we suggest to you PPWR preparation flow. It has 6 main high-level elements that we need to go through. So first, as we've seen, we need to interpret PPWR and interpret it for our own case. Then we do assessment of our current packaging portfolio and also related practices. Then we define compliance gaps, but also compliance opportunities, because it could be that you're already part of your packaging or all your packaging could be already compliant, and that's obviously competitive advantage. And then once we've done this, we build our action plan based on the priorities we define for our business. Then we'll look for the solution, and eventually we implement the packaging changes or other business changes required. We source packaging materials or packaging concepts, and then verify, certify our choices. So we're going to take you today through this flow and give you some practical guidance. Now I'll pass the word to Renata. She will take you through the first 3 steps, and then I'll come back for the second part, talking about packaging strategy and how to optimally identify your viable packaging options, etc. Renata.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me. I'm going to start with a quick overview for the packaging and packaging waste regulation. So last year was revised and adopted in the European in Europe in general, and then this year it was entered in force. Next year, so from the February this year to August next year is the period that you have a transition period before the regulation becomes effective. And then everybody has to start working on it in practical. So this is what means becoming effective. And then you all have from 26 to 2030 to comply or to change your packaging or to align with the regulation. And what does it mean, right? So the key target is recyclability and reducing material. So this will be enforced by 2030. The European Commission might revise the recyclability thresholds by 2030, depending on the technology that was already evolving during this next 5 years. And what is the penalty if you don't do anything? Or right, it is by 2030, 1st of January, you cannot have your packaging in the market. So it's a big penalty, right? You have to do something, otherwise you cannot have your product in Europe. So the objectives of the PPWR is reducing packaging waste, right? It's not making everything recyclable, even though it's one of the targets, but it's reducing packaging waste. What's not possible to reduce or reuse, we move to recyclability. And one of the big focus is the plastic packaging. Yes, because as we know, it is complex to recycle. It is harmful to the environment, and you see that everywhere. So we have to find a way to, of course, use plastic. It's a great material, but use in a way that it's not harming the environment. Who is responsible for that? So if you are a packaging producer, if you import packaging, if you distribute packaging, and if you are a retailer or in hospitality, you have to comply. If your brand is on the packaging, it's your responsibility to collect the data and to report. And if there happens any penalty, you are responsible as well. So be aware that you have to work with the supply chain to gather the data and also be compliant, because it's not only one piece, but it's the whole supply chain has to work together to make this happen. To interpret in your PPWR, the PPWR for your case, each case is different. We are giving some tips here to try to guide you, but it's really tailored to each industry and each packaging. There is no way to a rule that applies to everything and then you just apply that. And so it's important to understand your packaging. So like if you have primary, secondary, tertiary involved in your packaging, so all of them will be, it's B2B and B2C that are covered under the regulation. If understanding the materials that you have in your packaging, if it's recyclable, if you can reduce that, if you can change to reusable. If you're in hospitality, it's a must to have reusable options for your clients. So there are some things that it's not only optional, the reusable, it's also enforced. The labeling, what sort of label you have, and the ones that you need to have. It's not yet, there's no harmonized label yet, but it's coming before the 2030. The packaging restrictions, so that's why if you're in the pharmaceutical area, there are some restrictions and also some exemptions for your packaging. So it's also case to case. Preventing and minimizing packaging weight. So when you have this packaging half empty, this is also being penalized. So it's reducing the material that you don't need. It's very important. Reuse and refill, especially in an e-commerce, takeaway, beverage, transport packaging. So again, looking into the empty space that we sometimes ship around and reduce that, because you get penalized over that as well. And special attention to plastic packaging, because it's where the fees are higher, the eco-modulation fee, and also there's more restrictions around recycled content. So you still can use plastic. There are some cases you need plastic, but be aware that you have to maybe to change some specifications around that to be compliant. How could you assess your packaging portfolio? This is a short checklist to support you. How could you start assessing your packaging? So starting collecting the packaging data, I see most of the companies, they don't have the data for your packaging, and they don't know what sort of, for example, oh, it's soft plastic. Which type of plastic? Oh, we don't know. There is recycled content. We don't know. So there's a lot of things that you have to gather. So that's why it's important to work with your supply chain. Remember that it's B2B and B2C covered in this regulation. Focus on products with higher volume, meaning I will get you through a hierarchy approach, especially if you are a big brand and then you have a lot of products. You cannot tackle everything at the same time. It's time consuming, it's people that you need, you might have to hire more people for that. So you really have to structure what's priority for you. So I would focus on what's higher volume, what you sell more. So then you have more volume of packaging. And then that, if you tackle that first, you have a higher impact. Prioritize what the consumer is requiring, something that we didn't see in the poll much, but it's very important, because if your consumer or your clients, they don't value that change, they probably won't be able to pay more. Sometimes when you change packaging, it might cost a little bit more. So they are not like seeing the value that changing that packaging, so they wouldn't change to some other brand. So pay attention to what they are saying, right? And it's very important as well to consider that in your approach when you choose where you start. Evaluate the packaging material type. So like see what you have already monomaterial, what is problematic. Problematic means the ones that are not considered in the regulation, or they are considered harmful, so you have to change. So like maybe you go directly to these ones and then change them first, because they are the hardest one. And also it will take you more time to go through that. In the other way, the other side of this is like choosing what is easy to replace. So sometimes it's just like a bag it's not for food, it's for something like tools, right? So like this bag, it's problematic material, so change for something that it's recyclable, or you can reduce that. You can make a different sort of packaging that you can just pick the product from inside. So think in the products that are easier, and easier means that it's not food, because foods you have contact, cosmetics you have also issues with interaction with the outside. So try to tackle what is simple first. And then revise your packaging against Reciclas or C-Flex standards, which are the ones used now. I'm going to go explore a little bit more in the next slide. And take the design to reduce packaging. Remember that the main goal is reducing packaging and then recycle materials when you cannot reduce. and create the hierarchy approach, which I'm also going through with you here in the next slides. A little bit of the RESI class, just an example. For example, by 2030, would be acceptable the RESI class standard A, B, and C, but then after, which includes 70% recyclable, after 2030, the extension of the class C will be eliminated. So you need to comply to A and B. So keep in mind that we have already standards that you can follow, and there is a change over time on the regulation that after 2030, it won't be acceptable. So keep this in mind when you change your packaging. And the next one, we are starting with the step 1 to approach your packaging in a hierarchical way. So the criteria I consider is volume, the material type, the design complexity of that packaging, and also the product inside, recyclability or reuse potential of that packaging, and the business feasibility, which means how hard is that to get through the supply chain, how expensive would be that, consumer acceptance as well. So we make like a table with this information. We give a score to each one. So high volume, high impact. Is this like the highest volume of product that I have? So this would be number 5. If it's a very low, I sell very low of this, we don't produce much, would be 1. Materials, this is already recyclable, so it's fine, so it could be 1. It's not recyclable, it's very problematic, we need really to work on this, 5. So we choose like that, and then the next step is to sum these numbers. So this is just an example, the pouch for chips, the PET bottle, the carton milk. So for example, I put some numbers here. So 5, 3, the material, 5, 1, 2. So then you see the complexity, recyclability, and then you sum all these numbers, and then you have a total score. So in this case, the pouch for chips would be the one that you choose first. So this is a way of helping you to guide you where to start. And then the step 3 is like what is high. You are separate in boxes, like high priority, medium, and low, and then you can start allocate your team and your investments as well to work on that. If you try to work in everything together, will be very hard for you and also very costly. So try to really separate in a way that it's also beneficial for you. Now I send over to Anna to talk about the next steps.
Thanks, Renata. So we've seen now the first 3 steps. Let's imagine that we interpreted PPWR for our own case, for our packaging and our business. We identified our main compliance gaps and also opportunities. And now we are ready to proceed with the action plan, and we need to define our business priorities. So I suggest to go through these 4 steps. First, to define your packaging vision. So where is it that we're gonna go? I understand our main risk and opportunities from business perspective, set priorities, and then build our own tailored PPWR timeline to align our organization and also align our resources on the way forward. So let's start with the first one, defining your packaging vision. So we've seen that Renata told us how to understand, how to assess PPWR impact, but that's only one element of the packaging. So that's not enough for the business success. And here you can see key elements. Of course, there are others, but key elements that need to be considered when we define our packaging vision. So first it comes the functionality, of course. So while you might find a solution that is compliant with PPWR, but if it's a compromise on your packaging functionality, on the functionality, and it ruins the integrity of the product inside, it makes no sense. Then if you choose the solution, but it doesn't go along with your objectives or your business constraints, or it's not sustainable for your business, it also doesn't make sense to proceed with this. And then as we talked about consumers, so if consumers don't engage with your solution or your operating packaging model, it's also not making any sense. So the idea is to map all those things for your concrete case and understand that intersection of important criteria that your packaging need to meet. I remember in the beginning we discussed that PPWR sets the targets up to 2040. So it means you can define your vision going that far. That's okay, that maybe not all elements are achievable at this stage. But again, while you're taking some decision in the short and mid-term, you're going to be keeping in mind that vision. As technology allows, as I don't know, certain factors allow, you can get closer to your vision. And at the same time, your vision will be your technical brief. So when you start looking for your solutions, we're going to cover this a bit later. Now we define our packaging vision. So what do we do with that? How do we get there? And I suggest first to do the audit of your current situation and to use for this a SWOT analysis. You're probably familiar with this. That's about mapping your strengths, weaknesses as internal business factors, and then external market context. Some people might say this tool is oversimplifying, but I think to me that's exactly what we need. I love this tool because it's very simply putting on, it's a one-pager of your situation, which allows you to understand what actually you need to do to get to the vision you would like to. So let's imagine you map your current situation. I just put here some example. For example, you start with your strengths. Here, obviously, the packaging that is already complying with PPWR would be your strength. So you're on a good starting point. And there could be some other operational packaging-related factors. Here I put, for example, let's say today you're already leveraging a co-packing capacity that obviously gives you flexibility. So if you need to do the major packaging change, you don't need to invest in your assets. Then we go to weaknesses. So all the gaps that you've defined on the previous steps here will be your weaknesses. And the good example, the real challenge in the industry, if your packaging material has a composite structure, basically you have a gap on recyclability at scale. And then we go to opportunities. In this context, there will be all the market evolution in packaging, new technology, innovations, packaging that becomes available at scale. And that's, the industry is evolving very fast, and that represents really opportunity for you to pick up solutions that are more ready for the future. And then you go to the threats. Here, the typical example that what we discussed, it could be interpretation of PPWR, especially that there are some elements which are left for later. Certain clarification will be done, for example, like recyclability grades and what's the recyclability at scale. So there are certain elements missing and will be clarified in a few years, but we need to act today, right? Because packaging changes take time. So basically, let's imagine now you have that overview, okay? SWOT analysis tells us to do what? So we need to leverage our strengths to act on those. That's our competitive advantage. Then we need to turn our weaknesses into our strengths. We need to take advantage of opportunities on the market, and we need to counter our threats. So by looking this way at this mapping, you can make a list of all the actions that help you to move from the situation to the desired state. Now, it could be a lot of actions as well, but imagine you could have that simple view. Now that you've done assessment of the actions you need to take, you can map them this way. So all the opportunities and all your risks, you can map them as high impact, how high the impact is on your business, and then the difficulty to tackle or uncertainty they represent for your business. So if you map this one, you can now understand and align your organization which actions come first. So you can see here high impact and relatively easy to tackle would be your priorities. And then it goes like this, like shown on the chart. So now you know where you go. Now you know what to do, and you know what to do first to have the biggest impact on your business. It can be either a positive impact or negative impact, obviously. So And afterwards, now we know our priorities. We are ready with to build our own PPWR timeline. Again, this is a very simple picture, which is very good to demonstrate to your organization what needs to do also to report to your management on the resource allocation, red flags. So what you do, first you map your PPWR timeline. So the milestones which are relevant to your business case. And then you put all the actions and changes we need to do on the previous step. You map them here to see how you align with the milestones that you have to comply with. And here will be very visible for you to see what are the red flags, what is okay, how far in advance we need to start tackling certain things in order to be on time. So that's the good mapping of your priorities and a good mapping for the resource allocation in your organization. So now we have a plan and we know where to go. Now we are ready to search for our solutions. So what are those viable packaging options for us? And here I suggest to try this flow. That's decision-making flow. So normally the suggestion is not to do the shortcut. So whatever solution you might see, which is available or your supplier offers you, you go for that. The idea is to go through the real assessment, not to miss any option. So the idea of this decision-making flow is to start really broad. So let's imagine you have certain packaging and for you, it's recommended to assess all the range of packaging options you have. So irrespective of packaging material, irrespective of packaging format, irrespective of single use, reuse, etc. So just map what's available out there. The next step, we go to assess the functional requirements. So as we've seen before, we should not have any compromise on the product integrity. And here, basically, you will already filter some options. Some options will not fit your needs. The next step will be PPWR assessment. That's what we've seen with Renata. So you assess those options as per how close they take you to the PPWR readiness. And the next step still, if you have several options there, you can use life cycle assessment to understand if there is a significant difference. Basically, here, of course, we should not look at just LCA of the material manufacturing, but we need to look at the full life cycle from the extraction to manufacturing to user stage, and also the possible end-of-life scenarios, which are available in the markets where you aspire to sell your products. And the last step will be actually assessing the implementation feasibility, viability, consumer perception, etc. Let's imagine you put your exploration in this simple view. So you have all the options out there, and then you map them as per factors that we've just seen. You can give them relative scores, and it gives you understanding how they stand versus each other. Some people say, Anna, when I show this flow, they say, Anna, we think it makes sense to start with feasibility, because obviously from business perspective, the cost element and investment element might be the factor of decision, right? However, I mean, it's true if you look at it from the business perspective, but we have a different objective. What we want to have is the proof of assessment that we've done, so that we didn't take out any option and we really been open to understand what's the best option we could have. That's also, that mapping will be a tool to communicate with your stakeholders, with your consumers, to explain how you make those choices, and it also helps you to verify your choices. So let's imagine now we have that mapping, and those factors we can group by impact, so how close it gets us this to our vision, and then scalability of the option. Imagine that to your management you can present this kind of mapping for the decision making. Very simple. So we take all the options that we explored and we rate them as per impact, so how good they fit your needs, and then the scalability. And basically the options which are in the high right quadrant, those will be the options that will be your viable packaging options that you can explore further or actually really go for those ones. So that was finding solutions. And talking about this, we would like to just present again this opportunity. So Elizabeth, she already has been talking about this. So this is a Sustainable Packaging Summit. That's the forum where you can look for your solutions. So if you do have challenges with PPWR, we really recommend you to go there and see. This forum has a high level content, and it's really to see what's available, where the industry is going, what's new innovations, how others are tackling their solutions. Right, Renata, we've been there last November and going this one again.
Yes, yeah, we were there last year. It was really valuable to see real examples of big companies, what they have done, what are the challenges, also solutions like material solutions. It's really rich. If you are looking to understand better how to, get through the PPWR, it's highly recommend that you go to the summit. It's really, really good. And we will be there this year again. So it'll be very nice to
Hope to
meet
see
you
you
in
there.
person as well.
A nice dinner, by the way.
Yes.
Okay, and then this takes us to the last step of the preparation flow that we have. So now that we identified our viable packaging options, it's time to implement those changes, source materials, concepts, operating models, and certify and verify. So this step will be very much different for every business, packaging type, etc. But here I'd like to share just several practical tips which will be relevant across, and that will help you on your journey. So first tip is reduce complexity before implementing change. So historically, packaging is there to differentiate. So we find ourselves with a diverse packaging portfolio with a lot of formats, SKUs. Sometimes not all formats are performing. There is a tail. We might have also wide supply base. Do we need all that supply base? Sometimes, as Renata mentioned, we don't know what we buy. So what actually the specifications? Is there an opportunity to harmonize that? So this is to streamline your efforts, because it's better to start with the situation which is, let's say, optimized when you do the complex changes like this. And also 99% while doing this exercise, you will find savings in reducing complexity of your packaging portfolio and supply base. And those savings you can, let's say, use to sponsor your PPWR journey. Tip number 2, create professional technical brief. So that's taking us back to what we've seen about the packaging vision. So it's going to save you a lot of time when you start really sourcing your solution and looking what's optimal solutions available for your case, to have that technical brief that so that suppliers can give you comprehensive feedback, and so that you can compare apple to apple when you get the propositions. Tip number 3, go for off-the-shelf solutions. So that may be not obvious, but here the point is, so if for your case, there is already a solution on the market, that it's scaled, that it's already commercially available, that it's proved to be used and consumers okay to interact with it. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel and start the development, although I understand you might want to customize because you want to be different. But the timeline is rather short for PPWR. It's important to focus on the solution for those, and then you might gradually think of some other options. And additionally, going for off-the-shelf solution, it means it's going to be more financially viable for you, and you will achieve the impact that the reduction of the environmental impact is achieved with standardization. The tip number 4, assess outsourcing opportunities. That's a bit going back to what we discussed, remember, when we looked at the SWOT analysis. It's about outsourcing certain packaging-related activities. And here I particularly would like to recommend to assess third-party packing, especially if you currently have equipment and the packaging change that you're going for assumes you need to do upgrade, change of infrastructure. So it's going to be an investment. And in current context, it's very risky to proceed with your own investment because we've seen there is uncertainty with regulations. Certain things might still change, evolve. Technology is evolving as well. New solutions are there. So the idea here is to launch and pilot with a third party, test the market, the value chain, consumer acceptance, and then you can make your decision. Either you can postpone your investments or you can even avoid them, considering really this new operating model. The tip number 5, secure plastic post-consumer recycled content. So this is relevant for all the plastic packaging. So the targets are set by the EU PPWR. And obviously that for many product types, we're gonna stay with the plastic packaging, especially for the complex and sensitive applications. So here the idea is not to wait, but act on this point, because today the way the targets are set in PPWR, there will be not enough at this stage. It's not enough PCR content and also of the right quality available across the applications. So here the recommendation is not to wait, to go see what's available, the suppliers you have on the market, the pricing, start testing, balancing already your virgin and recycled content in the packaging, gradually then increasing it to meet the targets. Here it's also very important there is a requirement of traceability for plastic content. So make sure to check your current or future suppliers that value chain of your recycled content. And then the last tip I would like to give is that get third-party verifications of your final packaging options. So although in the regulations, self-assessment for many requirements is sufficient, but here I really suggest to verify your choices, because that's the tool to communicate with your consumers, again, to prove your choices, also peace of mind for you that you've done the right choice, that you comply. If the audit from the authorities come, you're ready to show supportive documentation. And also if we talk about EPR fees, having labels, recognized labels and verifications will help you also reduce EPR fees. Yeah, so that was the last step of the flow we've seen. And now I pass the word to Renata for conclusion.
Thanks, Anna. To finalize, I just would like to, based on Anna and my experience, we work with brands through this complex regulation. And this is a kind of timeline that we see that it takes to get through the packaging and to really get this compliance done. Of course, it depends a lot on the amount of SKUs and the complexity of packaging that your company has. But usually it takes about a month to interpret the PPWR for your case, 1 to 3 months to assess the packaging. It depends a lot about the data you have already. Otherwise, it takes longer because the data collection is a really critical point. Defining the gaps in opportunity, another 1 to 3 months, building the action plan, 3 to 6 months, because there has to be an action plan that fits your business, right? It's not a very general action plan that can be applied to everyone. It's really specific for your case. And another 3 to 6 months to find the solutions in the market and maybe develop something or understand that has to be developed something for that packaging, and the implementation phase, which can be up to 2 years. So if you see here, we got around, can be up to 4 years to do all that if it's a very complex range of packaging. And this is basically 2030. So act now, don't wait. Start reviewing your packaging, because it takes time. It really takes time. And if you need any help, Anna and I, we are happy to help, get in contact. This is what we do, so we are really happy to help you if you need our help. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Renata and Anna, for sharing your insights and talking us through some of the pitfalls and challenges and how to address with PPWR. So now it's time to move on to the Q&A section of this session. We've had lots of questions come through, but obviously keep them coming. If we don't get to answer all your questions, which I think we probably won't, looking at the sheer number. But you've got the contact details of our speakers, so I'm sure they'll be very happy to answer your questions then, or indeed continue the conversation at the Sustainable Packaging Summit. So let's start with this question here. Somebody is asking, and we've had quite a lot of questions along the same vein, how should companies address the PPWR if they operate globally?
Well, it's a very good question, because it just adds a complexity to what you need to take into account. You obviously would like to not to have diversity of solutions. So in this situation, what I recommend, so I would say that PPWR is the most advanced regulations, packaging regulations. So it's like, and it really has this intention to harmonize across the markets. So, and it has clear targets and quite clear direction, although there are some uncertainties. So I would say, when you look at your global packaging portfolio, I would say, take this one and aim it as your global standard. No? So not everything will be feasible in all the markets, but gradually. So that helps you to harmonize your packaging options and choices across the markets. That's what I would do.
And just complement from I work a lot with Southeast Asian and Australia, New Zealand brands, and I know about APR development in these areas, in Canada, in the US, some states. So they are all kind of following the PPWR. So as Anna said, if you take the PPWR as your gold star,
simplify your portfolio to that. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, thank you very much. Somebody else has asked us, what KPIs or metrics are useful to track PPWR readiness and implementation progress?
I go. I think it's very much aligned actually with the tracking that's done today for the packaging goals that a lot of companies and corporations do. So take the main requirements of the PPWR, like recyclability, certain grade, recycled content, excessive packaging, etc. And you just map your portfolio. You can either do it based on the SKUs, the number of SKUs that comply, or you can do it based on the volume. So first, this allows you to understand your current situation and how far or how close you are to the objective. And then this is the tool also to communicate to your consumers or stakeholders where you are. Just simple like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's have a look. Yes, somebody else is asking, how sure are we that the PPWR will use Recyclass and CFlex as standards? That was a very popular question. I think many people are keen to see that answered.
Well, as far as I know, it's going to be reviewed in the next 2 years as well, the standards. But it's a good guide to take in consideration now, and it's mentioned that CFlex and Recyclass are the ones that are quite robust. So I think it's a good way to start using that. But and even if it's not going to be used exactly like it is, it's not going to be very different. So that's why I recommend that to be used.
That makes sense. Thank you. And relating to that somewhat, somebody else asked, Recyclass and C-Flex are focused on plastic packaging. What about fiber or paper-based packaging? Could the recyclability standards be based on the CEPI or Forever Green assessments?
Absolutely. That's the right recommendation here. That's the one to use. Yeah.
Perfect, short and to the point. Somebody else has asked us about a challenge I presume they're facing. How will it be possible to design a plan when the design for recycling grading has not been clarified by 2028?
Well, we just discussed there are guidelines already available. So like Recyclasso, Forever Green for fiber-based packaging. This is the best we have. And I think on recyclability, what we need to focus on first, understand the maturity of the sorting and recycling infrastructure in your target markets. So it's another way to do it. You don't even need a guideline as such. So you need to be able to recycle your packaging at scale. So why don't you take a look at those markets and map, understand which recycling infrastructure is available there. So it gives you an idea which packaging types or material types can be classified as recycled at scale. Also to understand what's emerging and what's not, if there are new material streams emerging or not. So I would monitor that to understand that you stay aligned. And it might also mean that even across Europe, since you might have a different maturity of markets with the sorting and recycling system, you might need to introduce to the market more than one solution. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, that at least until the infrastructure gets certain maturity would be compliant on those markets. I would suggest that.
Yeah. And some certifications, as Anna mentioned in her presentation, that if you get some certifications, so the standards are a guide. It's not like a law, but it's right. It's a guide for you, and you can also have certifications. You can work on your packaging around if it's recyclable. So the certification if it's recyclable in those markets. And as we said, like you make you prioritize what is easier and like a biggest impact, and then you go into that was more complex. So don't worry so much about the most complex now. Like put it in your hierarchy, but there's a lot still to work around that. So this is not a reason to you not to start working on that.
That makes sense, thank you. Somebody else has asked us, how should companies document compliance? Are third-party certifications or self-assessments valid?
Mm-hmm. So the responsibility of documentation and keeping information will be mandatory for all the value chain, so that the final company that's placing packaging on the market be able to demonstrate the conformity, having the information from everybody up there. As we discussed, I mentioned that PPWR does not say it's mandatory to have verification, so not for all the requirements. I think there are specifics for recycled content and its traceability, but overall, it can be a self-assessment. But again, as we discussed, it's better to validate the outcome or your packaging options that you pursue, better to validate for the peace of mind and to make sure you pass the audit.
It's important to have evidence. Yes. Either way, you keep the evidence and the tracking of information.
Mm-hmm.
Great, that makes sense. Somebody else is asking us that PPWR mandates the use of PCR materials in packaging, but currently approved PCR materials in the EU exist only for PET. And the question is, how should companies handle this gap when using PCR in other types of packaging?
It's a good question. So this is one of those that we discussed. It's a high impact because this is a mandatory requirement, but at the same time, the value chain is not ready to provide everything that is required. So here, as I mentioned, it's better to start early, map, understand your options, looking not only EU, but also outside. Obviously, keeping in mind traceability and of the sourcing from outside of the EU. And basically start slow, see how that evolves, because the production of recycled content is, in this context, is the big business opportunity. So I think it's going to pick up. I think recently we had, Packaging Europe had that webinar about also bio-based options for PE and PP, which also noted in the text of the PPWR that potentially that could replace or support the targets of recycled content. So things gonna evolve, but what you need to know is what's available out there, start testing and keep an eye on the innovation and infrastructure around that. So, but yes, that's a complex element indeed.
Great. And somebody else has asked us, broadly, what are some common gaps companies discover when assessing PPWR readiness?
Well, I would say, first of all, they don't know what they have. So in terms of materials and recycled content, labeling, recyclability, they don't know what the materials they have. This is the biggest to start then the work, I would say. And then after assessing would be, there are a lot of ready solutions in the market. So I think sometimes you feel like, oh, overwhelmed because it's very complex, but sometimes actually there are, because it's been a lot of development in the last years. PPWR it wasn't enforced, but was already discussed. So I think a lot of solutions are already in the market and can be in scale now when we have this obligation to have this packaging. Yeah, and then I think the last one would be that there's a lot of like paperization, so changing plastic to paper or fiber-based packaging. But in a lot of cases, the plastic it's enough depending on the plastic type and so on. So like, don't be afraid as well. You need to have the knowledge first, and then you understand that you are not that far away from the regulation.
I would also add, I think during the assessment, companies find themselves also the fact that for one packaging concept, they might use different materials. And that's the first step to the recyclability, to try to unify if it's feasible to use monomaterials, and also to make sure they are separable for proper disposal. So then companies find themselves, obviously, the challenge with the recycled content. And maybe I would also add labeling. So clarity, what needs to be on the label, what to say, what not to say, how not to oversay, how to be too vague, etc. So, yeah. But also, so labeling, labeling criteria also going to come a bit later. So it's another challenge.
Yeah, be careful for greenwashing in the labeling.
Oh yes, definitely. Great. I think we've got time for one more question before it's time to wrap things up. Somebody's asking, what are the penalties for non-compliance and how will enforcement be managed across the EU? Is there a risk of product withdrawal from the market if packaging doesn't comply?
Yes, the penalty is you cannot place your product on the market from January 1st, 2030. How do you find out? So there will be audits around the EU, and then you find out. Also, people can claim that or complain about your packaging. Like maybe your competitor. So this is how it will be handled across. There are several registration number, unique number. So depending on the country that you have your headquarters, this is where you are going to report. And then there you have a number that will associate to your packaging. So there is a way to trace and see if you are, who is that packaging from and if you're compliant or not. And then they will be removed from the market, and you might get new, not new, but like another fee on top of this. This is going to be decided in the coming years. There is not clear fees at the moment in terms of penalty in fines.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just quickly get that off the screen. There we go. So yes, that's all we've got time for today. We have a lot more questions come in, but obviously, yeah, people have your contact details, and also, as I mentioned before, you'll be able to continue the discussion at Packaging Europe Sustainable Packaging Summit. Like I mentioned, takes place in Utrecht in the Netherlands from November 10th to November 12th this year. And for this year's event, we've added an extra day to make space for even more networking, interactive content and breakout sessions. And we'll even have an exhibition hall party as well as tasty dinners and everything like that. So should be a great event. So yeah, we really look forward to seeing many of you there. This webinar will be available on demand within the next couple of days, and you'll be sent a link to access it in case you want to recap on anything you've seen in today's session. So yeah, that just leaves me to thank you, Anna and Renata, for being here today and for sharing your insights. It's been a really interesting presentation.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks to everybody for attending. Yes, have a good day.
Thank you so much. Great questions.
Yes, and yeah, thank you everybody